So listen, I am well aware that in the past several weeks, I've pissed a whole metric F-ton of you off by saying that I never really bought into this whole Dominion software switching 8 million votes in Venezuela and China and all that. I never really bought into that as the best legal path to go down in terms of investigating what actually happened in this election. And there were a variety of reasons for that. I mean, listen, I'm not a lawyer. I think a lot of this for me was just gut instinct. As soon as everyone was talking about the Kraken is gonna be released, well, ain't been no Kraken, but I always thought it was a really ridiculous claim to begin with, and I just didn't think it had as much merit as other avenues that were being pursued. And I'm sorry, guys, it looks like I'm actually right in this regard. Listen, no one would have been happier about this to be wrong than me. Like, I would have been thrilled to be wrong in this particular area, but I just don't really think I am. You look what happened yesterday in Georgia. Will Chamberlain actually did a great Periscope about this, explaining why, because he's actually a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I'm just a layperson that runs her mouth on the internet. But Will is a lawyer, and he really broke down why yesterday in Georgia, Sidney Powell and Lyd Wood had their lawsuit dismissed outright because they didn't have standing to bring the lawsuit in the first place. Now, I understand that the arguments that they're making, they're sexy, they're a little conspiratorial. The right is very conspiratorial. I mean, the left can be conspiratorial too, but the right is definitely very conspiratorial. You like this sexy sounding stuff, and these more boring lawsuits that are more about process, they're not as sexy, and I totally get that, but for my money, these were always going to be the more effective paths to pursue. That just made sense to me. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is actually the most boring thing. And today, it turns out that we've got another path to go down. The state of Texas is suing 4 different states directly to the Supreme Court. And what's really interesting about this lawsuit is it doesn't require that fraud is proven. It doesn't require that at all. That is not the legal question at play. And I think that that is actually much more interesting and much more compelling than this whole 8 million votes switching from Trump to Biden. I just think it is from a legal standpoint and what I understand the law and the process to be. So we're going to read about what is going on with the state of Texas. The state of Texas might be coming to save us all. Who knows? But before we get into that, listen, folks, I'm trying to grow the channel per usual. I do almost, though not entirely, daily content around news, politics, culture, really whatever I find interesting. I do a combination of videos like this and also many more live conversations moving forward with people that I find interesting that bring different perspectives to the discussion. If you want to support what I'm doing, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel, clicking that button that's down there somewhere, turning on notifications, leaving a thumbs up if you like the video, leaving a comment if you want to feed that algorithm, even sharing it out to your friends and family. I really appreciate it. All right, let's read about what is happening in Texas. On Monday, just before midnight, the state of Texas filed a lawsuit that is far more important than all of the others surrounding the presidential election of November 3rd. Texas brought a suit against 4 states that did something they cannot do. They violated the U.S. Constitution in their conduct of the presidential election, and this violation occurred regardless of the amount of election fraud that may have resulted. The 4 defendant states are Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And this is really important, folks. Like Sidney Powell's thing about the Kraken and the software and all that, they would have had to amass an overwhelming amount of evidence to make that work. And it's looking increasingly like they just don't have it. They really just don't have it. But in this lawsuit that the state of Texas is bringing, all of that becomes moot because we're going back to a process issue. And this is something I have stressed on this channel over and over and over again, way before the election, is that we need to get back to following the process in this country. You have to follow the process when it is convenient for you, when it's going to lead to the outcome that you want. And guess what? If you are a principled, ethical person, you need to also follow the process that is established when it is inconvenient for you, because principles only mean something when you follow them when they are inconvenient. Let's keep going. Texas filed the suit directly in the Supreme Court, Article 3 of the Constitution lists a small number of categories of cases in which the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. One of these categories concerns controversies between two or more states. Texas's suit is exactly that. The Texas suit is clear. It presents a compelling case. The 4 offending states each violated the U.S. Constitution in 2 ways. First, they violated the Electors Clause of Article 2 of the Constitution when executive or judicial officials in the states changed the rules of the election without going through the state's legislatures. The Electors Clause requires that each state shall appoint its presidential electors in such a manner as the legislature therefore may direct. In early years of the Republic, most state legislators appointed their presidential electors directly without holding a popular election for president. This would change during the early decades of the 19th century, but a constitutional principle remained the same, regardless of whether a state appoints its electors by a vote in the legislature or by a vote of the people. It is the state legislature, and only the state legislature, that sets the rules. And guess who controls the state legislature in each of those 4 states? Republicans. Republicans control those state legislatures. They can do whatever the flip they want. And listen, like, we've seen a lot of Republicans not step up to the plate and not defend Trump. And I think that those Republicans are going to pay dearly the next time they come up for re-election. I mean, listen, I have been on the ground for weeks. People are pissed. They are pissed about what's happening to Trump. And I think, regardless of what happens with who ultimately ends up winning the presidency in this, the Republicans have set themselves up for an epic red wave of actual fighters. And frankly, listen, not all Republicans are created equal. This is something that people on the left really don't understand, is not all Republicans are created equal, and there's a lot of infighting that goes on in the Republican Party. And what I think is there's going to be a come to Jesus moment between the new right, the big, more inclusive tent that really tends to be much more libertarian than anything else. So it's really much more interested in individual liberties. So you're going to have that contingent, and then you're going to have the old school rhinos. Maybe, and I don't even know that they're all rhinos, but even just like these old school neocon Republicans that are just not willing to stand up and fight. I think one of the things that Donald Trump has done really, really, really well is he has instilled in at least a section of the right this idea that you don't have to roll over and take what's given to you. You have to go out there and fight. When I was on the left, it was so funny. Like, perspective is such a funny thing, because when I was on the left, I actually perceived that the left was not fighting and the right was. Now that I've left the left and I think I sit somewhere in the middle, maybe center. Sometimes I'm center left, sometimes I'm center right. I think it really just depends, but I tend to be pretty centrist in my beliefs. But when I look at the right now, I see a group of people who are, I'm sorry, guys. I did rallies for months and begged you guys to come out. I mean, Brandon begged you guys, Mikey begged you guys, Shamika begged you guys. We all begged you guys to come out to the rallies that we were doing. And you know what we got? We got, oh, well, we're scared that it might not be safe, even though we always had security. Or, oh, I really have to mow the lawn. There's no other time I can mow the lawn except for right during your rally, so I don't have to come. Like, the right didn't show up as much as they could. And that, to me, is like, the left always shows up. If the left has a protest or a rally to go to, they show up. The right does not. And I think that what this election has done to the right is it's really shown people that showing up just to vote on election day is not enough. You have to fight for what you believe in. And I think that that's a really positive thing. Thus, when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court extended by 3 days the deadline for receiving mail-in ballots, contrary to the laws passed by the state legislature, the state court changed the rules in violation of the Electors Clause. Summarily, when Georgia's Secretary of State responded to a lawsuit by entering into a compromise settlement agreement and release with the Democratic Party of Georgia and modified the signature verification requirements spelled out by Georgia law, that changing of the rules violated the Electors Clause. The second constitutional violation occurred when individual counties in each of the 4 states changed the way they would receive, evaluate, and treat the ballots. 20 years ago, in the landmark case of Bush v. Gore, the Supreme Court held that it violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment when one Florida county treated ballots one way and another Florida county treated ballots a different way. Voters had the constitutional right to have their ballots treated equally from county to county. Now, I've already made a video on this channel talking about how that part of the lawsuit in Pennsylvania, I thought that that was actually a particularly compelling case, especially when you take into consideration that, guess what, guys? Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and even our probably least favorite Supreme Court justice right now, John Roberts, were all involved in fighting the Bush v. Gore case. This is something that all three of them are going to be really, really familiar with. So when election officials in Wayne County, Michigan ignored the requirements of Michigan law and denied poll watchers access to vote counting, while other counties in Michigan followed the law, that violated the Equal Protection Clause. Similarly, in Wisconsin, when the administrator of the City of Milwaukee Elections Commission ignored the requirements of the Wisconsin law and directed election workers to write in addresses of witnesses on the envelopes containing mail-in ballots, while ballots without witness addresses were deemed invalid elsewhere, that resulted in unequal treatment of ballots in the state. This, to me, is one of the most cut and dry cases that there is. I mean, Bush v. Gore pretty clearly said, you can't do this nonsense, and the states are doing it. This is black and white. This does not require proof of fraud. This is cut and dry so far as I can tell. Importantly, the Texas lawsuit presents a pure question of law. It is not dependent on disputed facts. Although these unconstitutional changes to the election rules could have facilitated voter fraud, the state of Texas doesn't need to prove a single case of fraud to win. It is enough that the 4 states violated the Constitution. The lawsuit asks the Supreme Court to remand the appointment of electors in the 4 states back to the legislatures. And again, if they win, in theory, those state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. So, listen, I think that this gives Trump a really, really, really good fighting chance. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this. I also think it's fascinating that Ted Cruz also stepped up to the plate in this Pennsylvania lawsuit that Sean Parnell is bringing around the mail-in ballot issues, and has said that if the Supreme Court agrees to hear this case, that he's actually going to be the one to argue it, which I think would be epic. Ted Cruz has argued in front of the Supreme Court something like 9 times, and he's got a pretty good track record with the Supreme Court. So I think, like, he's not always my favorite person in the world, but listen, I think that this is setting it up for Texas to basically swoop in and save us all. I don't know. We're going to see what happens. Listen, I have maintained my position on this whole affair in that I'm really trying not to have strong expectations either way. This is more of a mental health issue for me, guys, than anything else. I believe in fighting this up until the very end. I believe in investigating everything as thoroughly as can be investigated. I believe in making sure that the process and the law was followed. I don't know who's going to win. I'm trying to keep myself very much in a state of in the middle, because I think that it's frankly just the healthiest thing to do. I think it's healthy to be pleasantly surprised if Trump pulls this out, and believe me, I will not be a diplomatic person at all if Trump pulls this off. I really I will be MAGA head to toe all day every day if Trump actually succeeds in this. But at the same time, I also don't think it would be the end of the world if he didn't and Joe Biden ends up getting inaugurated. Remember, this country has had bad presidents before. They will have bad presidents again. And frankly, if it goes that route, I actually think it sets Trump up really, really well to run again in 2024 and have a lot more people on his side, because I think that a Joe Biden presidency is going to do one thing really, really well. It's going to reinforce that the American people were right to vote in Trump in 2016, because Trump was a direct response to 8 years of Obama. That was what Trump was a response to, was 8 years of Obama. Not because Obama's black, but because of Obama's policies. That was what it was a response to. Well, what is Joe Biden doing now? He's doing all his appointments from the Obama era. This is like Obama part 2. And it's like, again, the Democrats learn nothing. They really learn nothing. So I think they're setting themselves up to lose the House in 2022. And I think that, if And I don't know which way this is going to turn out, but if Trump doesn't pull this off, then he is beautifully set up to run again for a second term in 2024. We're going to see what happens. I'm just going to sit back, eat my popcorn, and enjoy the show. All right, guys, that's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.